right. Myth: parental alienation is not real.
Okay, so I think the only way that we're going to be able to answer this is if I draw upon some of the textbooks that I have, because there's a lot of research that's been done over the years, so much. And I'll start with, let me see, who will I start with? I'll start with Dr. Childress again, because a lot of his stuff makes a lot of sense to a lot of us who are clinicians. So I'll start with him. So in this part of his book, he writes theoretical overview. The psychological processes involved in attachment-based parental alienation. So he calls it attachment-based parental alienation, are complex, but they become increasingly self-evident with familiarity. So anybody who is another mental health professional who's working in this area, I agree with that statement. The primary reason for the initial apparent complexity of the dynamics is that they involve the psychological expressions within family relationship patterns of a narcissistic borderline personality structure that has its origins in early attachment trauma from the childhood of the parent, which is influencing and in fact driving the patterns of relationship interactions currently being expressed within the family. That is 100%. What do you think about that, Dawn? Is that what you're seeing within your family?
Definitely. I think it, and the way it breaks it down with that attachment base in there, we're talking about the child relationship, the ability for them to have a relationship with with both of their parents. I could definitely, that does make sense.
Yeah, that's what I see in my rooms as well, because I work with couples, I work with targeted parents, I work with alienating parents. Yeah, that's what I see too. And here he says the inner psychological processes of the narcissistic borderline mind are inherently complex and swirling, and linking these distorted personality processes into the functioning of the underlying attachment system adds another level of complexity. However, the nature of the pathology is stable across cases of parental alienation, so that this consistency in the pathology provides ever-increasing clarity of understanding from increasing familiarity for the concepts. Fully understanding these seemingly complex psychological and family factors requires an integrated recognition of the psychological and interpersonal dynamics across 3 interrelated levels of clinical analysis. 1, the family systems level. If we work with this population, we need to know a lot about family systems work. We need to know a lot about intimate partner violence, IPV, or family and domestic violence. We need to know a lot about that. We need to know a lot about the next one, personality disorder level. We need to know a lot about the personality disorders that we're working with within this space. And 3, the attachment system level. As mental health practitioners, if we do not have a very solid grounding in these 3 different dynamics, interrelated levels of clinical analysis, and these dynamics, we should not be working in this field with this population. So this is why I'm questioning, do the legal professionals who are commenting in this space about families, are they very, very, very exceptionally well versed? Do they have degrees in this? Have they done the extracurriculum subjects that we need to cover to be able to even work with this population? That's concerning. Each of these levels individually provides a coherent, explanatory model for the dynamics being expressed in parental alienation, and yet each individual level is also an interconnected expression of the pathology contained at the other 2 levels of analysis, so that a complete recognition psychopathology being expressed as PA requires a conceptual a conceptual understanding of the process across all three distinctly different yet interconnected levels of analysis. So all of this, the family systems process, this involves the family's inability to successfully transition from an intact family structure that is united by the marital relationship to a separated family structure that is united by the continuing parental roles with the child. So it goes on, the characteristic psychopathology of the narcissistic borderline parent. So we need to know a lot about this area as well. Draws the child into a role reversal relationship with the parent in which the child is used by the narcissistic borderline parent as an external regulatory object. So basically, we are their drug. We regulate them within the house, as you know. Do you have anything to say about that, Dawn? Because to be told that it's not a real phenomenon to children, adult children who've grown up in this space, we completely disagree, because all of the research that's been done describes exactly what we know.
Yeah, so when you were reading some of this off, some of the things that I thought of was, even when I was a guardian ad litem, none of these people have the qualifications to determine if a parent is safe or not in a courtroom. And if you think about the courtroom, you're standing in front of a judge for what, 20 minutes, maybe a couple hours, depending on how difficult the case is. When you're talking about custody and there's all these things that they have to kind of dissolve, like the dissolution of marriage. So in that small frame of time, people are being diagnosed or called an unsafe parent, and there's not a clinical psychologist. They're not there. This is missing from all of it. So this is kind of they need to hear our voices, and we need to be able to speak and share what we know we've gone through, but we also have excluded the very entity that needs to be present in these court cases.
So the mental health treatment plans are not being drawn up. So what you're saying as a guardian ad litem, you're going into these court cases and you're not seeing the mental health professional and the treatment plan being brought in.
No, but I'm hearing people use these labels that aren't those people, that are not qualified.
Right.
So that's a huge problem.
That is a huge problem. So if that's going on and there's not correct diagnosis going on of parents, so are they basically, is that a 1, 2, 3 step? Are they now contributing to child psychological abuse because they're not taking the proper steps that they need to be taking?
That and the fact that even though, and I don't want to say that this is the judge's fault, because they get these cases thrown in front of them and they have a very little time to make a decision. They don't have enough background into this family. They don't know the dynamics, but they bring in the children, and occasionally we'll talk to the children directly. But again, they're not trained in this field. So the questions that they're asking them may not be the actual answers that they're going to be getting from these kids, from these children. So do they know the right questions to ask?
I don't know that they need to be asking the questions. I think, again, we need to go back. We're in the wrong system. This needs to be going back into the mental health system. The clinical people who are working in the mental health system, who understand the pathology, are the ones really who should be asking the questions.
If the judge only has this family in front of him for 20 minutes to 2 hours, whatever it takes, his hands are tied behind his back because he doesn't have a path for them. So it's almost like the judge needs to have somebody that he can refer them to.
Correct. It needs to go into the mental health system. That's where it needs to go.
Right, but I'm talking about a mental health person being there, is a mental health.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, they need to be on in that room at all times when they're
Yeah.
talking about custody.
So, and I'm encountering a highly litigious custody dispute involving attachment pathology with a child. That needs to go straight out. Get an appropriate clinical diagnostic assessment. And for the child, which will be child psychological abuse, and a differential diagnosis for each of the parents. That it's clear. It's clear. Why is that not happening? Because then the mental health practitioners need to know how to record the treatment plan and what the components are, and everything that goes into a clinical assessment report, an initial intake assessment report. So I've been reading some really interesting things on forensic custody evaluation reports that aren't good. So about the way that they're doing them. So I'm not going to say too much about that.
Was this a transition? Wasn't it at one point, wasn't the clinical psychologist the ones that would make the custody reports? When did it
I'm not
transition
sure.
to a forensic? And maybe I'm
I
wrong,
heard
but
about 30 years ago.
it just seems that we've got to have the mental health experts, like you said. I agree with what you're saying and what you're reading from Dr. Childress's stuff, that the children need to have somebody in that courtroom for them. And I'm not talking about the best interests of the child attorney or the guardian ad litem. I'm talking about the clinical psychotherapist or the clinical psychologist who can assess the situation and determine what the diagnoses are for each of the people involved in this. And that includes the child, right?
Yeah.
The parents and the child. So that's the only qualified person or people that should talk to or speak about any kind of diagnosis and what needs to be done from there. And that means that the custody hearing has to stop until that can be done.
Yeah, I think so. And I totally agree. The mental health treatment plans need to be written up specifically for each of the family members, and then take it from there, and then a report written up. I think unless that's done, then we've got a huge piece of the puzzle missing. So I think
then we don't have the parental alienation. If it's being abused, then that would be reduced. We wouldn't have that claim.
Absolutely.
Because right now there's nobody in the courtroom to call them out on it.
No, there's also the other problem that anybody who is giving false allegations within family court, there's no repercussions for that. If you were in criminal court, there is, but in family court, there isn't. So especially in Australia, a judge removed that quite a few years ago. So
if I make a false claim and I call the police and I tell them something happened to me that didn't, I could be arrested. That's the way the criminal court works. You cannot make a false claim against somebody. So why is it okay in family courts? It doesn't make sense. The family courts is part of the same judicial system.
Yeah,
it's part of the same system. So the same laws apply, but it's not being followed. So we don't have the right people in these courtrooms.
Yeah. So what's going on here, and why is this industry, the family court system, why is it a $70 billion a year industry in America?
Oh, then the amounts that people pay just to be a parent is insane. It is unacceptable to have to pay to be in your child's life.
Who's keeping this system
we
going?
We know who. Without mentioning them, we definitely know who.
Yeah.
And that's known all the way across the country and probably around the world.
Yeah. So, okay, so I can go into a few of the other textbooks that I've got here, but basically it's pretty clear cut for anybody who's trained in this area to realize alienation tactics, behaviors. We can identify them in children very clearly. We can call them, none of it's real, but it is. It's well documented. It's well researched. We need more research in the area, but the research that we have got so far is very, very solid on children. There's hardly anything on adult children, which is my area more so. And my research very much points to all of the symptoms and problems that the adult children are also experiencing. So, and a lot of it stemming from going through family court. So, yeah.